then since he has learned about Hinduism also so much, he's able to combine these things and look at contrast these things very well also. So very impressed by Rishi, and please welcome Rishi Suresh.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Rishi Suresh, and I've just finished my junior year at Clearbrook High School. So in essence, I'm honored that I can come speak with you guys today. And I'm not really an expert when it comes to Hinduism, but I will share whatever experiences I can with you to try and help you guys understand how Hinduism has impacted me. So my early introduction into Hinduism came way back when I was a little kid. My mom introduced me to stories like the great epics like Ramayana, Mahabharata, etc. And these stories really had an impact on me because I was able to learn these stories and I really liked them. So I would read these stories and learn more about them from my mom whenever I could. And now I took this basic Hindu understanding of like certain stories and then applied that in other areas, because in Clear Lake, where I live, we have satsang groups and bhajan groups. So when I was little, my mom took me over to these bhajan groups. I would sing devotional songs, bhajans, and I would learn the meanings behind these songs and learn how this actually prays to certain gods, and then learn things like that. And then afterwards, I also had a satsang group, a Lalita Sahasranam group and a Vishnu Sahasranam group that's in my area. And I would participate in that as much as possible. And when I was little, I learned both of these by heart at a pretty young age, and I would just go participate as much as possible. So these things laid some sort of a foundation for me when it came to Hinduism. And then another way I got introduced to Hinduism was through Carnatic music. And that was something my mom taught me, and I actually started learning from when I was 5 with a formal teacher. So from this, I was able to get some sort of better understanding of Hinduism because of the fact that my mom tried to get me to understand exactly the meanings were behind the songs. So I understood further what Hinduism really meant. And now, even after that, when I was young, I learned more about Hinduism through the heritage class that was hosted at Sri Meenakshi Temple. And I went there for many years. I learned many things that ranged from just the epics, shlokas, to even more intricate things such as values. And with these values, I was able to, this values class that I took, I was able to understand the values inherent in many of these great epics, such as Ramayana. Basically, do whatever your parents tell you, or say with the Mahabharata, which has morals like do your duty. These things are prevalent throughout these epics, and by learning these values in this class, I was able to apply them to my everyday life and then just become a better person overall. So then how does this really help? Hinduism was laid as a foundation for me, but then after that, there are lots of instances where Hinduism helped me forge my own identity, so to speak. And now, in essence, if you're here in America, there's lots of pressures to conform to American norms or American customs. It's really important that we keep our own Indian Hindu identity, because if we lose that and start to conform, then what happens is that we no longer have an identity of our own, and we're left somewhere in the middle. We're no longer purely Hindu, or we don't become that true American, or rather we're left in the middle with no real sense of identity. Thus, that was something that I had to get over and that I needed to really understand how to deal with. And there were lots of instances that I had to deal with that. One being just the fact that I'm a vegetarian. Now that's really difficult because where I went to school, in my elementary school, no one was a vegetarian except for me. So this was something that I just had to take on faith from my parents, saying that being a vegetarian is good. And that was something that I had to keep with myself. And that's something I kept for many years. And even I did this despite the fact that I really didn't know many other vegetarians until I got into intermediate school or even into high school. So pretty much, I just had to take this on faith and go with it. Now this is important to me. This is important to me because of the fact that it showed me that I can resist that conformity, that peer pressure to just conform to everything. I was able to see that I could definitely do something if I wanted to, and that's where that idea of like not conforming and being able to hold on to your Hindu identity came from. Then afterwards, in essence, through my experiences throughout being from a little kid all the way till intermediate school and high school, I've learned that Hinduism doesn't mean that we can't tolerate other faiths. Rather, what I've interpreted Hinduism to mean in my life is that essentially we tolerate but don't compromise on your Hindu identity. So keep your identity, but don't be intolerant of other faiths. So one big thing I learned from Hinduism, one big value, was seva, or service. And this is something that I was introduced to at a very early age. Whenever I went over to India, one time, or a few times actually, whenever I went over to India, I went to orphanages and gave out food to little children. When I was a little boy myself, my parents would take me over to this orphanage and I would hand out food. And the thing is, this instilled a sense of seva, or like having the sense to go and volunteer when I was little. And this went further and further as I grew older. And as Jay Kumar Uncle mentioned the program, the Shanti program done by Aim for Seva a few years ago, when I saw all of the work that people like Jay Kumar Uncle were putting in, the number of hours that they were getting up to try and make that program succeed, that made me want to learn more about Aim for Seva. And by doing so, I learned about the noble efforts that they championed, the fact that they were trying to give education, food to children in India who were not as advantaged, did not have all of the necessities that they would possibly need to be contributing members of society. I realized that I should probably do whatever I could to help as well. And as he mentioned, what I did was that for my violin Arangetram, I took all of the money I collected, and I gave it to Aim for Seva because I felt that it would be a very good thing to do, because in essence, it would be something that they could benefit greatly from. And then furthermore, from these ideas, this instance right here with the Arangetram made me want to volunteer even more. So what happened after that was I took that volunteering, that spirit of volunteering, and when I went to India the next time, so that was probably a couple of years ago, instead of just spending a vacation there, I went over to a public health center, which is an area that was close to my grandparents' house that provided subsidized health care to people who really couldn't afford it. So when I was there, I was able to help people who were illiterate or couldn't figure out exactly where to go, which doctor to see, etc. And this made me feel good because I was able to contribute to society. Then afterwards, this volunteering has put me into other places as well. For example, this year, I was part of the Mayor's Youth Council, which is essentially an organization that does volunteer activities throughout the city of Houston. By doing that, I was able to help I was able to pretty much do volunteering throughout the entire year. I was able to volunteer with events hosted by the city of Houston, and this really made me feel good in general. Now, another thing in my life that has kind of been important to me is debate, which is something that I got involved in back my freshman year of high school. So the debate I do is something along the lines of terms of like a philosophical debate. It centers around certain value propositions. So in essence, these things I learned from the Hinduism, all these values, I was able to incorporate those things by finding similar ideas expressed by Western philosophers. So these Western philosophers did in some instances, they took the ideas of Hinduism and they kind of turned them into their own ideas as well. And this is actually prevalent in some people's works, like Mill, John Stuart Mill, who did actually read Eastern texts and use those to make his own ideas. So there are these things. So Hinduism, even though it had a huge impact on my early life, also continues to have a big impact in my life today, because I'm able to incorporate things that I learned way back when, those values, and apply them today, even in things like debate. So in the end, it's important to understand that Hinduism is necessary for us to establish some sort of an identity for ourselves. If we don't have Hinduism, then in essence, we're not going to be we don't have that big as strong an identity as we would otherwise. Because we give up that Hinduism, then we try to reach that conformity with American customs, we meet them halfway, and we no longer have a true identity. So in the end, I just want to close with something that I've pretty much used throughout my entire life, and this is a value I learned from epics like the Ramayana, etc. What you have to do, what I do to make sure that I don't do anything wrong, is essentially whenever I take an action, I think about what my parents would say, and what my parents would say, whether or not it's right or wrong. And that helps me keep things straight. I know whether I'm doing something right or wrong just based on that. Because if my parents disapprove of it, I know it's probably wrong. If they would approve of it, then I take the action.